Intro. What if Seneca, one of Rome's greatest Stoic philosophers, lived in our time? Would he be sitting in a cafe, quietly scrolling through Tinder? Would he be swiping right, hoping to find love in a sea of endless profiles? It sounds almost absurd, doesn't it? And yet, that's exactly why it's worth asking. Because even though dating apps are new, the struggles behind them are ancient. The craving for connection, the fear of rejection, the restless desire for more, always more. These aren't 21st century problems, they're human problems. And for that, Seneca's wisdom might be the very compass we've been searching for. Picture this. Millions of people swipe every night, chasing the spark of something real. Some find it, many don't, and most are left with a quiet emptiness that grows after the screen goes dark. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Think about that in the context of modern dating. The heartbreak we rehearse in our minds. The insecurities we feed with every unanswered message. The doubts that whisper, "Am I enough?" Seneca wouldn't dismiss love. He wouldn't laugh at our search for it. But he would challenge how we go about it. He would ask, are we pursuing love with wisdom? Or are we chasing distraction? Are we seeking depth, or just variety? And most importantly, are we loving in a way that makes us better human beings? This isn't just about dating apps. It's about how we approach connection itself. How we choose to open ourselves, to risk being known, and to endure the discomfort that comes with vulnerability. Seneca lived nearly 2,000 years ago. But if he were here today, I believe he'd have something startling to say about the way we swipe, match, ghost, and fall. And that's where this journey begins. In this video, we're going to take Seneca's timeless wisdom and test it against the modern world of dating. What can a Roman philosopher teach us about love in the age of apps? The answers might surprise you. Before we dive in, if this resonates with you, if you've ever wanted to bring ancient wisdom into your modern life, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Because this channel is where philosophy meets the struggles of today. And together, we're going to uncover lessons that will change not just how you date, but how you live. 1. The illusion of endless choices. On dating apps, the promise feels intoxicating. Infinite options, endless possibilities. With one swipe, a new face appears, and with it, the thought, maybe this is the one. Maybe just one more swipe, and then another, and another. It feels like freedom, but Seneca would see it differently. He warned us that abundance often becomes a burden. The more we have to choose from, the less satisfied we become with what we already hold. He might compare dating apps to a banquet where the table never ends. At first, the spread excites us, but soon we feel sick, not because the food is bad, but because we never stop consuming. This is the illusion of endless choices. That happiness is just one swipe away, hidden in the next profile, waiting in the next conversation. But in reality, it keeps us restless. We chase possibility instead of presence. We scroll through potential instead of building depth. Seneca would remind us, the mind that always looks for better never truly values what is already good. We become like travelers who, instead of enjoying the city they've arrived in, immediately dream of the next destination. Love, for the Stoics, was never about endless novelty. It was about constancy, about choosing well and then staying present. When we see dating as an endless buffet, people stop being people. They become options, checkboxes, numbers. Seneca would argue that this isn't love. It's consumption disguised as romance. And consumption, as he wrote, can never satisfy. it only multiplies desire. So while modern culture tells us to keep swiping, to never settle, Seneca would quietly push back. He'd say, the more you seek, the less you see, the more you chase, the less you cherish. Real freedom doesn't come from infinite choice. It comes from learning to choose wisely, and then to commit. 2. Desire versus self-control. Desire in the age of dating apps is immediate. One glance at a profile and our imagination runs wild. A smile, a witty line in the bio, and suddenly we're projecting entire stories about who this person might be. It's intoxicating, but it's also dangerous. Because unchecked desire doesn't just guide us, it controls us. Seneca warned that desire without restraint is a form of slavery. The moment we let impulse lead, we hand over our freedom. Think of the endless refreshing, the late night scrolling, the dopamine hit from every notification. It feels like connection, but it's really compulsion. We're not choosing love. We're chasing stimulus. For the Stoics, freedom didn't mean indulging every craving. It meant mastering those cravings. Desire itself isn't the enemy, it's natural, even necessary. But when desire becomes obsession, when it dictates our actions, we no longer own ourselves. Seneca would say, the one who is ruled by desire is no different from a prisoner. Imagine two people. One who spends hours swiping, restless and unsatisfied. Another who pauses, reflects, and engages with intention. Both seek connection, but only one is free. The difference isn't luck, it's self-control. And for Seneca, self-control wasn't about denying joy, it was about directing it wisely. He would remind us that the real test isn't whether we feel desire, but whether we allow it to master us. Modern dating often tells us to follow every spark, every impulse, every swipe. Stoicism counters. Pause, examine, and ask, does this align with the person I want to become? In the end, self-control doesn't kill passion, it refines it. It transforms desire from a restless hunger into a steady flame, one that warms instead of consumes. 3. Rejection as a teacher. Few things sting more than rejection. A profile you like never swipes back. A promising conversation goes silent. Or worse, someone you felt a connection with suddenly ghosts you. Modern dating makes rejection constant, almost mechanical. And yet, Seneca would not see it as cruelty. He would see it as instruction. He believed every setback was material for growth. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. To Seneca, rejection is that friction. It tests us, sharpens us, forces us to confront our expectations and pride. While most see rejection as proof of inadequacy, he'd see it as a classroom, one that teaches resilience, humility, and perspective. Think of how often rejection spirals into self-doubt. I wasn't good enough. I'll never be chosen. Seneca would challenge that voice. He'd argue that rejection says less about your worth and more about the world's unpredictability. Sometimes the other person wasn't ready. Sometimes they were chasing their own illusions. And sometimes, it simply wasn't meant to be. Why should that diminish you? For the Stoics, the wound of rejection becomes a forge. Each no is an opportunity to practice patience, to cultivate strength, to detach your peace from someone else's opinion. When you no longer fear rejection, you discover a radical freedom. You can show up authentically, because you're no longer enslaved by the need to be accepted. Imagine facing dating not with dread of rejection, but with curiosity. What can I learn from this? That shift turns rejection from a wall into a doorway. Instead of closing us off, it opens us to deeper self-knowledge. And in Seneca's eyes, that is victory, not in winning someone's approval, but in winning mastery over yourself. 4. Love as virtue, not transaction. So much of modern dating is framed like a marketplace. Profiles read like advertisements. What we offer, what we expect, what we want in return. We talk about investing in relationships, getting commitment, settling, as though love were a bargain struck between two negotiators. But Seneca and the Stoics would see this as a distortion. For them, love was never about transaction. It was about virtue, patience, kindness, loyalty. These were not things you demanded from others, but qualities you cultivated within yourself. A relationship wasn't a contract to be fulfilled. It was a stage where character could be practiced. Imagine scrolling through profiles not with the question, "What can this person give me?" but with, "How can I show up with integrity?" Regardless of outcome, that shift turns dating from consumption into contribution. Love, in Seneca's eyes, was less about acquisition and more about expression. Expressing virtue through the way you care. Forgive, endure, and remain steadfast. He might remind us that when love is reduced to transaction, it collapses the moment expectations aren't met. But when love is grounded in virtue, it endures, because it isn't about what you're receiving, but about the person you're becoming. Even unreturned love can still refine you, because the act of loving with patience and dignity is itself a practice of the good life. This doesn't mean Stoics denied pleasure or affection. It means they sought to anchor love in something sturdier than desire, in values that don't fade when beauty does, in loyalty that doesn't vanish when hardship comes. For Seneca, real love was never about winning someone over. It was about living in a way that made you worthy of love in the first place. Outro. So, would Seneca swipe right today? Probably not in the way we do. But if he did, he wouldn't approach it with restless scrolling, empty cravings, or fragile ego. He would approach it with wisdom, with restraint, with the understanding that love is not about endless novelty, but about the practice of virtue. What Seneca shows us is simple, yet radical. Modern tools may change how we meet, but they don't change what it means to love. Apps can open the door, but character decides whether what's inside will last. The swipes, the matches, the conversations, they're just the surface. What matters is whether you show up as someone grounded, patient, and worthy of trust. And here's the truth Seneca would want us to carry. Your value is not measured by who swipes right on you. It's measured by the kind of human being you're becoming. Every rejection, every disappointment, every fleeting spark is an invitation, not to chase harder, but to grow deeper. To refine yourself until love is no longer a transaction, but an expression of the best within you. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by dating apps, if you've ever questioned whether you're enough, remember, the Stoics remind us that you already are. Love doesn't make you whole. It simply reveals the wholeness you've carried all along. And now, I want to hear from you. How do you think Seneca would handle modern dating? Would he even bother swiping at all? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this video gave you something to reflect on, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps this message reach more people. And if you want more timeless wisdom applied to modern struggles, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. This is where philosophy meets your everyday life. So until next time, keep your mind steady, your heart open, and your choices wise. Because in the end, love isn't about finding the perfect match. It's about becoming the person who can love well.